Welcome to the Legacy Project. And Dennis, we're glad to have you a part of this today. And I look forward to this conversation about the legacy you've created. We're talking with Dennis Estes. And I've known Dennis for about a year, and I'm very excited about a project that he's about to launch called Live by Design Academy. And some major lessons and learnings from his experience about how to build your future, and really impressed with the material that he's produced. But I want our audience to get to know you, Dennis, and
Awesome.
to understand your background. So where were you born, Dennis?
Pullman, Washington, right on the border with Idaho.
I know Pullman. I didn't
Do
realize you
you?
were born in Washington State.
Yeah.
Tell me about your education, your background.
Well, but I was born in Washington, grew up kind of right there in the borderlands between Washington and Idaho. Kind of consider Idaho my home if I was to pick a state. Grandparents settled there, wheat farmers in the Palouse country, as you know, Washington. So background was sort of, I guess agricultural, dairy farmer on one side, wheat farmer on the other side. I had just sort of a lower middle class upbringing. Everybody worked hard, everybody produced. A lot of just kind of earthy kind of things, grew our own gardens, hunted, raised our own beef and chickens and that kind of thing as a boy. And that was just kind of my introduction to work and to life was, none of us had ever gone to college, so don't expect to do that. Expect to work harder than any two people, and you'll succeed in life. So that was sort of my background.
It's interesting. I grew up in Kansas, and the only other wheat fields that compared to what I saw in Kansas was Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
Huge wheat fields.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have a great grandfather that was one of the largest wheat farmers on the Palouse for many years,
wow.
back in the 1800s.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
I do. I'm the oldest of 13, Jim. There's a little bit of yours, mine, ours, and theirs mixed in there. But, we never referred to each other as half brother and sister or step brother and sister. We were the Estes clan, so we all were just kind of in it together.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and tell me in terms of the person you've become, and how did your parents, grandparents, what helped shape your values?
I think in the early days, my grandparents on both sides were very much in the, I'll say, religious sphere. They were, two different denominations, but very faithful people and very much, I'll say, devout kind of people. But what really, I think, influenced me in the beginning, at 5 years old, my parents divorced. There was 3 siblings at the time. And my father had decided that he wanted to do something that we could do together. He owned a cab company in Pullman, Washington. And there was a fellow that had just come from Japan and had lived in the Bay Area for a while, and he opened up a martial arts school. So at 6 years old, in 1959, my father enrolled me, and he and I trained together. And I think that really sparked something inside of me, something that I could attach to, and maybe it was just because of the timing of what was going on in my life at the time. I think, Jim, that's probably been the single biggest influence in my life, besides just sort of the family, how to really say this, just sort of the way my family was, just back to earth, hardworking, give you the shirt off their back kind of people, but just figured they were going to work till the day they died.
Mm-hmm. So were your other siblings involved in the martial arts as well?
No.
Yeah.
I say no. When we were younger, everybody kind of had their time on the mat, but nobody ever stuck it out and did anything. Nobody earned any rank or anything in it.
Mm-hmm. What made you decide to stay with it?
I think I had a keen interest in the difference between what I was experiencing in my life and what I was being taught on the mat. There was a discipline but it was different than being disciplined by my family or by teachers in school. It was a discipline that I wanted to be a part of, as opposed to, it was freedom instead of being constricting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, just touching base for a second in terms of your education, in public schools, I assume.
Yes, public schools.
So, how did you react or respond to public school education?
I made it through. I graduated middle of the pack, on time. There were classes I absolutely loved. There were other classes that I just got by in because you needed the credits. I think, again, there's a structure, Jim, that a part of me was a little bit of a rebel. And I found myself, I wasn't a disciplinary problem, but I was probably as close to the disciplinary problem as you could get without being there.
Yeah.
Now, my siblings were some of them were just the opposite of that. So I come by it honestly, I guess.
Yeah. What were your favorite courses?
I loved history. I loved geography. Anything that put me back in time. And I think that was part of the allure of the martial arts. I just could see myself living 300 years before I really was.
Yeah. So just so our audience fully understands the context for some of these questions, you're an 8th degree black belt?
That is correct.
Is that the highest level of black belt?
No, actually 10th degree is the highest.
Yeah. So how many years did it take you to get to the 8th degree?
I started in 1959. I got my 8th degree in 2016.
Wow. So.
Yeah. This is a very traditional art that I'm a part of. And so earning rank as you go through your black belt rankings, typically, if you go from 1st to 2nd degree, you have to wait 2 years. And if you go from 2nd to 3rd, you have to wait 3 years. I did accelerate that in the middle and was moved quicker, but it's a very demanding art from the standpoint of making sure if you're going to be a black belt that you understand way more than just how to do physical techniques.
So explain that a little bit, because from my worldview and my understanding of the martial arts, which is very limited, I thought, well, you're a black belt, you can't get any better than that. But you obviously go through these various degrees. And so beyond just the physical techniques that you might learn in the martial arts, what other kinds of things do you learn to get to the 8th degree?
So there's a tremendous amount of the Eastern philosophies. There's a lot of the tradition in this particular art that I study that goes back, anchors into Shintoism, Buddhism, even back into India, and some of the training and some of the information that come from the gurus there. A very strong Zen tradition that goes through it. So when you get to be a black belt, most people will say you're a 1st degree black belt, but actually the Japanese word is Showdan, and Sho means beginner. So really, when you start as a black belt in a traditional art, you really just learned enough of, I tell people, I've learned the alphabet, I've learned a little bit about the punctuation, I know a little bit about sentence structure, and now you want me to write a story. So as a 1st degree black belt, you're kind of like, okay, so you've got a little bit of a few of those tools, but now we're going to show you what to do with them.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so the time that's spent in between the various degrees, is it study? What's the process from degree to degree? So
first of all, Jim, it's very difficult in a traditional art to make rank. And I'm not going to poo-poo commercial dojos. They have a purpose out there, and they've got valuable training. In a traditional art, it's really not about making the rank. It's about learning the information, and it's about how that changes you as an individual. Master Ogasaki, the founder of this style of jiu-jitsu that I do, said that the reason for study is the perfection of character. And what he meant by that is completion. of character. And so there's concepts like ikigai, reason for being. What is your reason to exist on the earth? He was very much one, if somebody needed your help, we were trained both in the healing side as well as the martial side. If somebody called me at 3 o'clock in the morning and they lived 100 miles away and they asked for my help, I was to get out of bed and get in the car and drive and go help them. No questions asked. So it's that family sort of thing. It's the Eastern philosophies of your family, but of developing the self, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in developing that dynamic, and not necessarily, Jim, from a religious standpoint, although, there is that aspect that's there, but it's developing you as a spiritual human being sensitive, being aware, understanding laws of nature, understanding dynamics of individuals and how they interact with each other. The greatest warrior is not that warrior that's fought 100 battles and won them all. The greatest warrior is that warrior that's never had to fight a battle, because you become aware and you're able to deflect, or you're able to sidestep, you're able to lead the conversation in another direction. You learn to control yourself. And in order for a fight to happen, it takes two angry people. I always tell my students, I don't teach people how to fight. I teach you how to defend yourself. And so one of us has to not be angry. And so a lot of that martial art training is learning to control yourself, to control the ego.
Mm-hmm. So those values and those influences from Eastern philosophy, your father, did he also embrace those as he went through the process?
Yes, he did. My father was more engaged in the sporty side of it. Mm-hmm. So the sport that came out of Jiu-Jitsu is what we know today as judo. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of tournament kinds of things. My dad was very engaged in that. But he didn't have the same interest that I had in the esoterics, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And so growing up in eastern Washington or western Idaho, the values that you began to learn in Eastern philosophy, did you find them in conflict with sort of the normal American religious expressions?
Yeah, I think I did. Mm-hmm. And I think, like I said before, martial art and learning the Eastern traditions was very liberating for me. It allowed me to expand my mind, and it allowed me to expand my awareness to encompass more. You and I had a discussion a few weeks ago about you having a set of beliefs, or me having a different set of beliefs, or individuals. And I had this very same discussion just 2 days ago with somebody, and I said, look, just because I don't believe the same philosophy that you do doesn't mean we can't get along, and it doesn't mean I can't learn something from you. And I think that's what the Eastern philosophy did for me. It opened me up like the lotus flower opening up, where I think in the other tradition, it closed me down and it blocked me away from other people and other beliefs and other ideas. I'm hungry. Even today at 73 years old, I'm hungry to learn about other people and other things.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to jump around here a bit.
Sure.
How did you get to wanting to create the Live by Design Academy? And talk to us about your goals and objectives and what that represents or presents today to a potential student or to the culture as a whole. Because having read your material, I am thoroughly impressed with what it offers in terms of this divided, polarized world in which we live. Mm-hmm. That if people tried 50% of what you're suggesting, the world would be a better place.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about how you got there.
Sure. As a young man, watching my parents, watching my grandparents, watching how hard they worked, I understood that in order to be in control of my life, I couldn't be, and this is not an attempt to put a specific belief or idea down, but I couldn't be an employee. Okay. I understood that if I wanted the freedoms to expand and do what I wanted to do, I had to be an entrepreneur. I had to find a freedom that I could generate the income that I wanted to be able to live the life I wanted. And for me, that was always part of Ogasaki's dream of giving back. Mm-hmm. And so I developed a mission statement that, when I looked at my life was to teach, to coach, to mentor others to achieve their full potential. And so I started into owning and operating different businesses. I've owned restaurants, I've owned martial arts schools, I've owned coaching businesses from the standpoint of helping the plumber learn about books and laws and things like that, because he's a great plumber, but he really doesn't know how to run a business. And so I did some of those things, and I succeeded, but I didn't feel like I made an impact. And I was introduced to a concept, a lot of people poo-poo this, but I was introduced to the network marketing concept. And the network marketing concept, the old MLM kind of thing, gave me a platform that, again, allowed me to expand. And I thought, wow, I can do this while helping other people. This is not about me. This is about how many people can I take with me. And what I found, Jim, was that a lot of people that I worked with, that I talked to, they would get excited, and then they didn't know how to move forward from there. The dream was there. Maybe they'd been taught a little bit about how to find their purpose. Maybe they'd been taught a little bit about that why, what drives you. But the bigger majority of the people I talked to really couldn't tell me. Jim, they didn't know. What's your reason for getting out of bed tomorrow? I don't know. I'm still alive. I guess I just get up, and it's the plodding. It's one step in front of the other. Always knowing that quiet knowing that there's something around you that's more, but not knowing how to get there. Mm-hmm. I sat in the back seat. I had a bit of a career in law enforcement. I sat in the back seat of a police car watching a high school one night when I was a reserve police officer. Somebody gave me a cassette player with a tape. Now, it was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I didn't know that, but it was something to listen to. And during that conversation, I heard him say, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. Mm. Boom. That was like a pitchfork in the eye. Jim, for me, I sat back in that seat and I went, I'm in control of my life. And that was the epiphany that led me to Live by Design Academy. And the epiphany was simply this. I was living a life that was designed by my religious belief, by my parents, by my community, by everything other than what I had created for myself. And when I had that aha, it told me, it doesn't matter how old you are. I was a young father, had a couple of children at that time. You can design the life you wanted. I'm a voracious reader. That triggered me going into self-help, all those kinds of ideas and concepts to take ownership of my life. I built a huge distributorship. I created a lot of financial resources. But what I found time after time was people would come and sit down across from me and say, I don't know my why. Mm-hmm. I don't know my purpose. I don't have a mission statement. And it was through those conversations that led to taking my martial arts on one side and taking these discussions, and where people were in limiting lifestyles. They weren't living a full life to themselves. And that doesn't mean, Jim, having a lot of money or quote unquote being successful like maybe the world thinks. Mm-hmm. You can be successful and do anything you want to do. But if you're happy every morning when you get up, and most importantly, when you look in the mirror, if you like what you see, you're there.
So we're talking with Dennis Estes, the founder and architect of the Live by Design Academy. And Dennis, I pulled a quote from one of your documents or pieces of material, which kind of speaks to what you just said. Under the assigned life, not a bad life, not a wasted life, a life designed by circumstances, by expectations, by the loudest voice in the room, which is rarely your own.
Correct.
That to me, based on a lot of the reading I've done of your material and our conversations, kind of capsulated to me what you are about.
Yes.
That
Yes.
Life has happened, but being sure it is your voice that shapes your future
Yes.
and determines that. I love the language that you use in terms of building your future or the architecture of building that future and being intentional about that. Kind of speak to that for a few moments in terms of what usually happens to us. You may have addressed that already partially, but talk to me a little bit about how the legacy that you have to really get to that point of shaping and building is important to us.
Yeah, Jim, it is foundational to us as individuals. And when I look back and I look at my life, I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't fulfilled. Okay? And so I'll use that word fulfilled. There was always something, no matter how successful I was, there was always an emptiness. There was always a feeling of something not being there. And there was no structure. As I read these self-help books, as I read personal development, as I dove into the Simon Sinek's of the world, and, he's got some great material out there. But it got to a point where people would say, now what? Okay, I've got this. Now what? I had it.
Yeah.
Now what? And that's what led to that live by design. And the concept for me was, I first started saying I'm a personal lifestyle planner, but I went way beyond that. It was to help people create a structure. There's so many of us, Jim, that live in quiet desperation right now, wanting to do, be, or have something different in their lives, but they don't know how to go about it. Live by design is created, and the word architecture and structure and foundation, these are words that we kind of understand, even if we're not necessarily associated in the building trades or anything like that. We understand what a foundation is. We understand that there must be an architectural design to put something together. And when I started giving people the language, then things started to open up. And my Eastern philosophy training had more relevant language to the people I was coaching than anything else that I was doing. And that's when it all sort of came together when I created, I'm a personal lifestyle architect. And I help people live by design, not by default. And I, first of all, stimulate them to the point they go, whoa, I'm living by default, because some don't know it. And then they go, okay, so how do I find out how to live by design? Well, let's talk about it with a few questions and then help them. I don't do it for them. It's not about me. It's about me helping them step by step, one thing at a time. No great big epiphanies necessarily. And then when we get there, people would fall apart. And why would they fall apart? Because they didn't know how to live the life that was different. So it continues.
So when I hear words like architecture or build or even design, I think of somebody young. Does this concept or this language apply to people our age?
Absolutely.
And so that you become aware of this in your life. And because I'll be totally honest, when I first started reading some of your material, and you and I've talked about this briefly, but for our audience, they know me fairly well. But I'm a follower of Jesus, and not in the strict religious sense of the do's and the don'ts and confining me. I find that relationship to be totally liberating and empowering. But what struck me in reading your material was that even though I went to college, I went to seminary, I did all the things I was supposed to do to prepare, it wasn't until I started living it out
Yes.
riding with our gang unit for 18 months and doing interventions, working with people in neighborhoods impacted
Yes.
by poverty, racism, violence, interacting with those kind of people, that faith became real. And I began planning my strategies for doing interventions. But
Yes.
but I don't know that I paid as much attention to the architecture and the design that I happened to be there. I mean, I was on a plane last night coming back from Indianapolis, and I was sitting next to a lady, and I was talking to her about what I had been doing in Indianapolis. And she finally said to me, "I can't believe all the things you have done." But because I've lived a very diverse life, many different, as one executive coach told me, he said, "You don't only change positions every 5 years, you change careers." But I don't think I have planned it,
Yeah.
and or that intentionally designed it. For someone like me,
Yeah.
I mean, by all estimates of people that I know, they would say I've lived a good life, a great life.
Yeah.
But I think it's been more by default than by design
Okay.
in many ways.
Okay.
And so, but I'm intrigued by the fact what at this point in my life, in my career, because I'm not done, I'm not finished.
Right.
How do I begin to make that design work? And again, the principles that you've laid out in the various stages of that design and that architecture and that building are really intriguing and also helpful. So.
Right. So, Jim, that's probably the best question you've asked me since we sat down and started talking tonight. And it's interesting only from the perspective of architecture doesn't have to be rigid. There's been different architects over time that would lay out a design that was radically different than anybody else. There's been architects over time that had one design feature or one design construct that they learned in school. And then when they allowed themselves to come out, suddenly there was other designs that were inside of them that came out. And what I'll say to someone like yourself is you have a design. You have a North Star, okay? Your faith, it's guided you to a certain point, but it's not made you rigid. Jiu-Jitsu means gentle art. It's like a willow. When you load a willow with snow, it bends down, the snow falls off, then it springs back up. An oak is strong and rigid, and when it builds up with snow, the limbs fall off. So when we talk about live by design, I'm not talking about creating a structure that's rigid and keeps you constrained. I'm talking about tools and resources to come up against the wall and say, I'm not stuck. Look at this over here. This is liberating and freeing. This allows me to expand and grow. I'm going to go in this direction because I knew how to create this. I'll take the tools and resources I have that I've learned, and now I'll adapt them over here. And living by design, I think, gives you that opportunity to have the confidence in yourself that you are blessed with whatever you need. I'm a firm believer of this. If an idea comes into your mind, even though it may seem way out there, you already possess the foundation of what you need. Now, is your negative self-talk going to talk you out of that? Well, I was trained in this, and I went to business school. I wanted to learn to be an entrepreneur. I spent 2 years at Boise State University, and in the middle of that, I learned they're teaching me to be an employee. I left. I had the freedom to do that. And so what I would say to you is age doesn't matter. What matters is if you look inside and you find something's missing. And when you can define what's missing, you can design a plan to fill that space.
A key word that you used several times is freedom.
Yes.
And I think in reading your material, I was reminded of a biblical admonition: "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free."
Set you free.
And that I think in my journey, which contrasts with sort of the religious structures that would like to try to control or define what I'm supposed to be, that the seeking
Yes.
this peace and this purpose is what sets me free.
Yes.
And that I'm not limited. I mean, I've had staff that have worked for me in various organizations throughout my career that dreaded those moments when I would come into the office and say, "I have an idea," and they go, "Here we go."
Yeah.
But it was that for me, that relationship to something more greater than me in terms of, in this case,
Yes.
it's how I anchored my faith in the teachings of Jesus.
Yes.
It wasn't constricting; it was liberating. And
Yes.
in my own career, I mean, I've been fired from one job, a big job, and I often tell this story. When I came home, I was devastated, and I thought I was going to just fall apart. In fact, I broke down weeping, thinking I've never been fired. And it was for a principled position that I had taken. And I had this sense that God breaking into my life going, "Get off your ass, I'm not finished with you yet." And
I love it.
how you respond to that.
Yes.
I find in your writing, in your literature, that is so appealing, that mindset,
Yes.
and that liberation, that freedom to be able to pursue your passions and your dreams without and to follow what's in your heart,
Yes.
which I think is a powerful word.
Yes.
Speak to the freedom issue for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a character, there's a word in the Japanese language. Now, so the word shin, S-H-I-N, it's used a lot. And there's probably 19 or 20. It's like if I say there, what do I really mean until I give you context? Yeah. It's the same thing with shin. Shin kokoro, the ideogram is basically a heart. But in the philosophy, the Eastern philosophy, that's a heart-mind thing, and it's a unification. It's thinking and intention are unified. And so when I look at this idea of freedom, and I'll take one more step back. When I look at religions, at one point I took a class looking at the major religions of the world. I've done this with religions, I've done it with different philosophies. Jim, I find they have far more in common, and they're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And you can put whatever name you want to put to it, but the end result typically is the same, or it looks the same. So when I get to that, I grew up a child of Jesus. I am still engaged in that belief. All of my Eastern philosophy has just reinforced all the teachings that he gave to us. So what it did for me was allow me to say, okay, instead of being constricted by what I learned in Sunday school and thinking that's all that's out there, it fed my mind to look at other things, other people, other philosophies, other ideas, other cultures, and say, where are we the same? I've traveled all over this world. I've got 1 million air miles in one 10-year period, going from Europe to Asia to Latin America. And what I found, Jim, wherever I was, people were the same. Didn't matter what language they spoke. We spoke the same. So the freedom is really did we put such structures on ourselves? And I'm holding my head, but I'm speaking of mind. Mind is in the heart. Mind is in the intention. Are we limiting ourselves so much by those constructs that we're not learning what's outside of that? More importantly, Jim, we're not experiencing them. And when we shift that design and we say, look, let's build this so it's liberating, so it's freeing, and we can go explore those. I've been taught the truth. I know what society says is correct, but I also know there's an awful lot out there that's correct that I don't know yet.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. In this polarized world, which we're currently experiencing, and I'm going to use a concrete example, and you may or may not know this. I can't remember if we've discussed this. You're an Air Force veteran.
Yes.
I was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. And generally take positions because I think war's not only the result of failed diplomacy, but it is really all kinds of variables that contribute to it. So we might not agree on certain political positions, but how does this orientation that you're talking about, I know how it affects me, but in terms of how this orientation, what you're doing in the Live by Design Academy, navigate differences like that?
It's about exploration. And first of all, the first statement is, to thine own self be true.
Yeah.
Where's your anchor? What anchors you? You had an anchor that said, conscientious objector. This is not right. I am not going to put myself, and I'm not going to be involved. I respect that. I don't have one iota of trouble with that. So live by design doesn't mean I'm going to design you in my image or philosophy. It means that I'm open enough to listen to it, find where we can agree, spend time there. If we disagree, we can talk about that. I disagree, Jim, because, and I don't have to assault you or insult you to do that. And we can walk away thinking, no, I don't agree with that philosophy, but I do respect the man for standing up and doing what he felt was right. And I think if more of us did that today, we'd be a much happier world community. And I think we would see ideas coming together that would grow, because using my vernacular, we designed ourselves in such a way that we're no longer constrained by these ideas that we didn't get to choose.
Yeah.
Now, if I choose today to go back to those constraints, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if I don't, then I have the freedom to explore, and now I have a bigger set of tools to work with.
Dennis, this has been fantastic. We're talking to Dennis Estes, who is the founder of the Live by Design Academy, heavily influenced by Eastern philosophy and the fact that he's an 8th degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and how that has influenced and shaped his life. We're going to have to do this again, Dennis. There's more to uncover here. I really appreciate your transparency and your openness. 2 questions left.
Okay.
One will seem a bit silly, but it's a question I ask in every podcast on the Legacy Project.
Okay.
If your house were to catch on fire today, what's the one thing you would grab? Not your computer, not your wife, not your pets, but what's one thing in your life that you have in your possession that you would grab?
Wow. Wow. I did have a fire. I did lose everything in a fire, but I didn't have an opportunity to go in and get anything. It would probably be the scriptures. I have a set of scriptures that I've had since I was a young man, and I've written in them and colored them and that kind of thing. That would probably be what I would grab.
Okay, good. Now the last question is, what's the legacy you want to leave? I mean, I've always reminded of The Second Habit of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And in that, he talks about living with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And what people would say about you, and the opportunity to redefine that if you're given the opportunity. But what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
The legacy, I think, is he was true to himself, but in being true to himself, he impacted other people's lives. I want to be known as the guy that, as a police officer, was firm but fair. I want to be the guy, my core mission now is joy is the natural result of intentional living. I want to live with intention and help other people to see it, and then give them the freedom to choose that if they want.
I wonder if you would, I think I've talked to you about this, but we're doing another project called the Freedom Fast.
Yes.
And looking at the phrase that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the concept of happiness has often been misunderstood as just being sort of a feeling of happiness, but it really was about doing good.
Yes.
and that's where you find happiness, and that's where you
Yes,
find joy. Would you agree with that statement?
I would absolutely agree with that. That's the one word I use is joy,
Yeah.
and to describe it is helping others.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that brings me happiness.
Yeah. Dennis, this has been great. I thank you for your time and appreciate what you're doing and value our new friendship. And
Likewise, my friend, I appreciate being here and giving this opportunity to chat with you. I hope somebody found something valuable of what we talked about.
yeah, I'm sure they will. And we will do this again because I want to break apart the living by design elements and to uncover some of the words and the meaning behind those words. And I think that would be helpful to our audience. Thank you for joining us in the Legacy Project. This is a project that you can learn from other people, the legacy that has shaped and created them, and you need to wake up and ask yourself, what's the legacy you want to create? And to be intentional. And in this context, design it.
There you go.
And work toward it. Thank you.
Thank you.
To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. The podcast was produced by Matt Erickson, music by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode on our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build your future.